If you can go to 2A, open up your 2A assessment. We'll dive straight in. Alrighty. So the first one is this table. If you look at my screen there, we've got it's just an overview of, as I said, being the first assessment, or sorry, the first module of this topic. We're just going to start with the overviews about sort of training components, things like that. So these are guidelines. So you can always manipulate these depending on how you're training and things like that. But it's just sort of based off science in terms of generally, if you're training in this zone, this is the reps you should be doing, this is the intensity, and so forth. All right. So looking at strength, as you can see, if you want to write this in, generally our strength is going to be low reps, and I put down less than 6. So generally they find that, yeah, less than 6. But just bear in mind that even if you go anywhere up to 15, you're still going to get a strength benefit. But the more you go past 6, you probably start to going to get a bit more, hypertrophy, probably a bit more endurance as well. You'll still get a crossover effect, some strength gains, but you won't be maximizing strength. So whereas if you do, 5 reps, you're really probably doing, say, 80% strength, not much in hypertrophy like that. So that's sort of the desired zone for that. The sets we're looking at is going to be roughly 4 to 6 because we're doing less reps, so we should be doing more sets to make the total volume a bit higher. The rest period is 2 to 5 minutes. So generally, the more the higher the intensity, so more weight we lift, we need to have more rest period. Not just from a muscle point of view, but also our central nervous system needs that time to recover as well. Looking at the load, so put down 85% RM. So I'm going to just sort of talk about RM calculator. Who wants to jump in and tell me what 1 RM means?
Your 1 rep max.
Boom, very good. So when we want to work out how much to lift, we usually use what we can lift for 1 rep. And then once we know what we can lift for 1 rep, we can use that as a calculation for other like that. So for example, I don't like this website, I'm going to go to a different one. This one's better. So skipping ahead, but you can see, like when we do endurance, like we're doing 15 reps, they're saying that we should be doing 65% 1 RM. Well, how do I know what 65% of my 1 RM is? So we need to do a 1 RM test. Now that can be done as like, probably you two boys would have done a 1 RM test where you're literally working to getting just that 1 rep you can lift. But in a gym setting, it's not always practical to actually get a client, let's say a 50-year-old mother of 3. I'm not going to get her on the bench and get her to be lifting as much as she can. So we can do a predictive 1 RM test. So let's just say I had a client, she might have done 50 kilos on an exercise, and she might have done 10 reps. So what I can do is simply I can work out, okay, well, her 1 RM is 67%. Oh, sorry, kilos, 67. It's 1 rep max, but this one actually tells me that, say, for 65%, it's roughly 45 kilos. So if I was saying to her, I want you to now work in endurance, 15 reps, Sally, 15 reps, I want you to roughly do, 45 kilos. So that's roughly how we know what sort of weight we should be lifting. So 1 RM, does that make sense or not?
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yep, all good.
Gussie? Yep. Just stop me if you need. There's only 3 of us tonight, so we have a good chat about these things. Yep, so that's that. And for the strength one, we're looking at sort of 4 to 5 exercises because you're having 5 sets or 4 or 5 sets. You're having sort of 2 to 5 minutes of rest. So literally, logistically, you're not going to have enough time to really get, a lot of exercises done. Whereas we do look at the endurance, you're only going to have 30 seconds of rest, so you can have more exercises done. The next one is hypertrophy. So that sort of means it's a word for lean muscle growth or just enlargement of the muscles. which is, generally what most people want to achieve, males and females. Even say for females who don't want to get bigger, but they want to recruit, more muscle. It's always ideal to have more muscle mass. Good for our metabolism as well. So generally, they say between 8 to 12 is the ideal range. You can still get hypertrophy gains doing 5-6 reps, but mostly that's the ideal range. The sets is 3 to 4 sets. So you can start to see a theme here. I like to sort of use 30 reps as like a guideline. So if I do say 10 reps times 3, it's 30 reps. If I do say 4 sets or even 5 of 6, that's roughly 24 to 30. If I do say 2 sets of 15, that's around 30. So that's sort of like if you're calculating sort of roughly how much you should be doing, I say around that 30 mark, or between 24 and 34 is sort of roughly like that. If you sort of did 4 sets of 15, then you sort of think to yourself, hold on, that's 60 total. So it's probably a bit too much. So around that 30 mark's good. Hypertrophy, we've got the intensity is going to be between 65 and 80%. So less intensity than strength. So we can have our rest period lower. So roughly around 60 to 90 seconds rest. And the exercises, again, because the rest period is less, the weight is less as well. We can have more time for exercises, but we can also have, there's less stress, less weight on the body, so we can do a bit more volume. How are we going? I know I've been talking a lot. Do you need a second just to catch up writing all those into the table?
No, all good, mate.
Good. Anna, Gus?
No,
No, all
sorry,
good.
my kid's talking to me. Yes, all good, all good. Sorry.
That's right. All good. All right, next one's endurance. So endurance can be a bit vague. They sort of say, write down high reps for me, and then put in brackets there 15 plus. So generally 15 and above. You know yourself, if you're at the gym, you probably don't really go much more than 15 or 20. That would only depend if you're like I'm just sort of guessing, like just say if you're a Olympic rower and rowing for, the K1000 might be in that 3-minute zone. They might do some phases where they're doing reps of say 30 or 40, things like that. But you're probably not going to really go much more than that. But still, because it's endurance, you're doing repeated exercises or movements. That's going to build up that lactic acid a little bit, muscle fatigue. So 15, roughly 2 to 3 sets. The rest period, because the weight is considerably less, we can do roughly 30 to 60 seconds rest, a bit less. The weight, as I said, so make sure you write down the less than symbol, so it's less than 65%. So 65% I'd say would be with 15, but as you go more, so say if you go 20 reps, then it would be, probably a seesaw, it would go down to 60 or 55%. And then the exercises we got between 8 to 10. Again, we can do some more time-wise and like that. Now, the last one is power. So power is a bit tricky to program. I program power here as, think of it as sort of powerlifting. So, weightlifting, power cleans, things like that. Say, Gus, just tell me, for example, Gus, when you guys might do a power phase or powerlifting in your gym, would you ever do, say, power cleans? Would you ever do more than 5?
Nah, no more than 5.
No more than 5. Yep. So
No.
that's what I've done there. So your reps looking at 1 to 5, say for powerlifting, because pretty much what power is literally strength times speed. So it's literally, how fast you can propel a movement, but also with force. So you need some strength to generate force, but you also need speed. So if I literally had no weight in the bar, I wouldn't be generating any force. So you need a bit of weight, but if you have the weight too heavy, then you can't generate enough speed. So it's sort of that balancing act. So with the power clean, say for example, similar to strength, low reps, working on that speed and power. The sets again, 3 to 5 sets. The rest, because it's working mostly maximal, high intensity, you want to have sort of that 2 to 5 minute rest in between. The load, So see how it says 75 to 90. So your 75 would correlate when you're doing 5. Your 90 would correlate probably when you're doing 1, like that. And again, similar to strength, you probably would only do sort of no more than 5 because it's usually compounds, full body exercises, a lot of fatigue and that. Now, the other thing about power, though, just keep in mind, power can also relate to body weight. So things like, plyometric stuff. So if you guys do a sprint session, you might do a lot of, body weight, plyometrics, jumping, frog jumps, things like that. That's also power. So that's also pretty similar, but obviously there's no load. And because there's no load, the rest period will probably be less. You can probably do a few more reps. So think about when you're doing your frog jumps, you're still exploding, going really hard, but you can probably do more than 5 maybe, but you wouldn't do much more than 5 because you lose your technique and form. So that's another type of power, is the body weight stuff. Any questions with that, guys?
No, all good, mate.
No, all good.
So yeah, look, I know I talked about that, but that's a very brief overview with our training. So I'm guessing that I know I'm using you boys a fair bit, but when you walk in the gym, do you have a chart with all your weights, what you got to lift today, or do they get you to calculate it, or what do they got for you?
We with us, we do it on we have an iPad with all the program on it.
Yep.
And then in terms of like the 1 rep max, they've got like a graph that shows sort of if your 1 rep max is 130, say, then on the graph it'll show what you should be lifting.
So if you were doing, say, 5 reps, then the graph would say, well, 130, 80%.
Yeah,
of
for
that.
5 reps. Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. If you were training a client, say in a commercial gym, whatever, and even for yourself, say, Anna, you don't have the luxury of all these high-tech gadgets that the boys are spoilt with. I find even just like this website here is really good. So let's just say for yourself, if you went to the gym today, did 10 reps, you wanted to move to another phase, like you might want to do a bit more endurance. You could work out your, 65%, roughly 45 kilos, put that on the bar and go from there. So, cool. All right. Good stuff. All right. Next one is the very similar, but for cardio. So when we do cardio, we don't really use 1RM because we're not lifting a load. We're obviously working at our heart. So with the cardio, we use it as a base of our max heart rate. So first one there, I want you to put down 60 to 70% MHR. So MHR stands for your max heart rate. So it's percentage of that. So a really easy way, or does anyone know, let's just say I'm training a client, I've got no testing on me. How would I just sort of work out a really easy, not very precise, but an easy way of working out what would be their 100% of their max heart rate? Any ideas?
If you don't have anything,
yeah, if you got nothing,
maybe just ask them what their RPE is.
You could ask them RPE, which actually we get into, I think maybe 2B. We actually go in RPE, so you're ahead of the class there, Brendan. Well done. Another thing could be like an old school way, you might have remembered it from high school, is they say 220 minus your age. So that just gives you that roughly for your age, roughly your heart rate's going to be around. So for me, let's just say I'm 30, even though I'm 33, we'll say 220 minus 30 will be 190. So for me, 100% is 190. Now, just tell me though, what's probably one massive negative of that?
It wouldn't always be accurate, would it?
Not accurate. So my heart rate, let's just say I train a fair bit, and then I've got someone who hasn't trained for 5 years, but technically, if I do that little thing, we're going to have roughly the same 100% sort of line. So it would be good for most average people, middle of the road, people like that. You could just sort of work out a quick thing. But we're lucky these days that we've got, 10 years ago, you had to buy a heart rate monitor, put it around your chest and sort of work out like that, even harder than that. These days, we've got Fitbits, we've got smartwatches, so which gives the heart rate. So it's a lot easier these days to work out your percentages like that. So All right, so with those, as I said, 67% they say is sort of like in the sort of the recovery zone or the sort of the weight loss zone, they call it. 70 to 80% now is, they say, cardiovascular zone or aerobic. The next zones you want to put down is your anaerobic. So that's the lactic acid zone. So think of it this way. If you were doing repeated, say 150s or 200-meter runs at the track, you wouldn't be able to go more than 80 or 90%, because if you go too hard on your first 200, by the second or third one, you're going to have too much lactic in your legs. You're going to be sniped. So that zone, you're looking around 80, 90%, because that's going to develop into lactic acid, as I'm sure you know. The last zone is 90 to 100%. So that's where your heart rate is working at, top level. But because it's working so high, it can only be short amounts of time. So think of your short shuttle sprints and things like that. Don't worry about the column here. See the number of exercises? Leave that blank, because I think it's a little bit subjective. I mean, you might do one run for half an hour and that's one exercise. So, or you might do 20 shuttles. So leave that column, if that makes sense. Alrighty, question 2 we're looking at is the flexibility. So with flexibility, generally we can classify into 2 main categories. So we've got static and dynamic. So the word dynamic just means movement. Static means to stay stationary. So static is your old school, just holding a stretch in a fixed position. Dynamic is just anything was getting movement. Gus, just tell me a benefit of, say, doing dynamic stretching. I know I put a few examples there, but just sort of put down, just tell me, what do you think a benefit of doing dynamic stretching would be? Have a look, Gus. Anna.
I guess I'd go injury, like reduces injuries. That's what I would say. But that's already on there.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, just tell me, why do you think that, say, dynamic stretching would reduce injury more so?
I don't know. I don't know. I always stretch after exercise. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you know what? You might dynamic stretch before it without realizing. So yeah. I would argue that, let's just say you're going to do squats at the gym.
Yeah.
Barbell squats. I would argue that even if, let's say, if you go and do some, body weight squats where you're getting nice and deep, technically that's still squatting is still increasing the range of movement in the joint.
Yeah.
So, but it's with movement. Even if you did, say, for example, like lunges. If you're doing lunges, like you're just sort of doing body weight movements, it's increasing my hip mobility. So when I go and do barbell squats, I've increased the range. So it's all about increasing range of motion.
Okay.
To elaborate on your point about the injury risk, the analogy I use would be that, let's say you're a soccer player and you in a game, like say Timmy Cahill, he might do a kick over his head, or he gets his leg over his head. Just doing a static stretch where he just reaches his toes, that's not preparing his hamstring to be suddenly flown at a forceful rate above his head, compared to if I do, say, leg swings where I'm gradually increasing the range of motion. So I'm exposing my hamstring to a bigger range of motion. So when I do the kick, I'm expose my body to that level. So, Bray, does that make sense?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, it's. I just sort of saw it as like a prep, as you say, like a prep sort of thing.
Yep, definitely. So that's some of the examples there. So it does say list and explain, guys. I should have put that out. So it does say list and explain one benefit. So I put down 3 examples. So if you just want to pick one for each and explain it. So we've spoke about the reducing the risk for dynamic, and then you could explain that by saying it reduces injury risk because it's exposing our muscles to a better range of movement. if we do say the static stretching, what we could do is, what is the benefit? So again, it reduces injury risk, but this time though, we do static stretching normally at the end of exercise. So the reason why it would be reducing risk is we do it after exercise, because just say if we're doing those 200s I mentioned before, or 120s, we built lactic up in our legs, we need to sort of essentially, squeeze that lactic, get the lactic out of our muscles. So by doing that, we're sort of going to create tension by holding a stretch for a period of time. It's going to get out the lactic. So for the benefit of static, you'd write down it reduces injury risk by doing it after exercise by reducing lactic acid. Sweet. So it looks like we're all done with the benefits. So let's talk about the risk now. So list and explain one risk. So the examples of the risks you could choose would be, I'll talk about one of them. You can choose that one if you like. So say for the risk of static stretching. So just say if we look at this second one here. So can leave the client exposed to injury if performed as an only warm-up or as the only warm-up. So that would be the example of if you only do static stretching before an exercise, then you haven't done blood flow. You haven't got that blood flow to the muscle. You haven't warmed the muscle up. And you also haven't increased the range of motion. So that's what you could say for the risk of static. So if you only do it, or if you only do static before an exercise, you're limiting the range of motion. And you can always write down range of motion as ROM, like this one here, which is highlighted.
Just with the for the risk of static, excessive flexibility may cause joint laxity.
Yep.
So how? Yeah, can you explain that?
We don't, probably you and I don't have to worry about that. That would only be in extreme cases. So more so females, or even anyone who's sort of double jointed as well. Some people are just, their joints are just not stable.
Okay.
So that the joint is so flexible. It's probably the best example is someone, like you might know someone who has got a joint who's double jointed, and what happens is the joint keeps popping out. So
Right.
because it doesn't have the sort of ability to sort of stabilize itself, so then the joint keeps doing that. So some people, if they're sort of, the joint is too flexible, it will keep sort of dropping out, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But for the most part, like especially us guys, we're usually on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I need to do more stretching, flexibility. So that's that one. The risk with dynamic. So you can choose either one of those ones and just talk about it. So the first one you might choose is the high risk of injury if not performed correctly. So because there's movements done, let's picture a leg swing. So if you did have a client, doing a leg swing, they're kicking their legs quite explosively, let's say a beginner client, maybe in their 50s, for example, there is a risk that if they do that wrong, it could, cause a tear. If that makes sense, that one. And the other risk is, actually, I won't talk about that one because we're going to talk about it in the goals. So pretty much just choose that first one there. High risk of injury if not executed properly. That's pretty much what you got to say for that one. All right, so with the goals, looks like most of us are up. Good goals. Yep. All right. So for goals, the main thing you need to take home about the goals is static stretching can actually improve your flexibility or range of movement in the long term. So best example is yoga. Especially if you hold a stretch or a pose for say minute or 2 minutes, that's where your muscle will get those long-term changes or adaptations where, because you're exposing it to a minute or 2 minutes, it's going to hopefully, you're forcing it to change and get more flexible. Also, you can put down aids recovery, as I mentioned before about, stretching, recovery process. With the flexibility for so dynamic stretching though, that's mostly just going to be a short-term improvement. So as I said, like when you first start doing your leg swings, you know, your first leg kick, you might only get to say here, but then as you gradually warm it up, you can then get to here. So that's improving our range of movement in the short term, but there's no long-term effects. So if you only did that, you're not actually changing the structure of the muscle, and you're not actually forcing the joint to change.
So with the sorry, just back to the static. Was a long. So if you want long-term sort of benefits from it, how long should you be holding the stretches ideally?
Good question. They actually say about 3 years ago, I saw a study and actually showed that. So picture your muscle as like a pill, like a weird analogy, but like a capsule you take. They actually say that a lot of muscles actually have like a joint capsule around it, or fascia. Or like, you know, for the best example of fascia is, have you ever been on a foam roller on your ITB on the side of your quad?
Yeah.
And it kills like hell.
Yeah.
Because that's all that fascia there. So it's not actually, and you feel your quad, it's actually like, it feels a little bit different on the side because it's muscle, but it feels different. That's what fascia is. It sort of surrounds a muscle. So they actually reckon that a lot of muscles don't actually, the fascia doesn't really open up the muscle to get those benefits until about 2 to 3 minutes for a stretch.
Right.
Which to me seems like a lifetime.
Yeah.
So the take-home message is pretty much the longer you can hold it, the better. Is pretty much the main benefit, really. So they say, 2 to 3 minutes is where it's really going to open up and get those deep changes. With a client though, you're not going to really get time to really stretch them for long-term gains. But as I said, all the studies are showing these days sort of 2 to 3 minutes longer as you can. Unfortunately for us, because I hate stretching.
Yeah, it's the worst.
So I usually say sometimes like an ad break. If you're watching a TV show, ad break's about 3 minutes. If you do a whole one stretch per ad break, sometimes quality is better than quantity. Just sort of work on certain areas. Training guidelines, you can probably just put those down. Don't have to rephrase them because they are just literally as they are, numbers. So as I said, minimum 30 seconds. Actually, that's just what I said here. 2 minutes is ideal, but not practical in a PT setting. That's why it's always good if you do yoga. Sometimes, like, you actually go and do it. Like, you don't have to actually force yourself to stretch by yourself. You can just get it done. With the dynamic though, again, sort of they say 2 to 3 sets, 10 to 15 reps, and what muscles to do, all the body parts that will be focused on the session. So if you're going to do an upper body session, you wouldn't really spend a lot of time on your hips. You'd just be focusing on the muscles you're going to be working in the workout. Stretching, any questions?
All good.
All good. And Gus, I got your text message about your internet. No dramas. If it gets better, call out now. If not, all right. Next question, number 3, is we're just looking at. So again, a little bit of client focus. So if you've got a new client, so we've identified their goals and what they should be training at, strength, endurance, whatever. A bit more about like what are some open-ended questions for a new client. So I'll put some examples down there. Try and think of your own ones though, because open-ended questions are literally a question that does not result in a yes or no answer. So they result in another question, hopefully. So question 1 I put down, what's the main reason you've decided to come to the gym? So just picture it like someone's walking in. So what do we want to know if they walk in? What brings you in here today? So then I can direct them to other services. What are you currently doing? So you can rephrase these ones anyway, if you want to just change the wording into your own, how you would ask them personally. Or what type of exercise are you currently partaking in? That could be changed to what does your current program look like? Again, because then I can know more about them and pass them on to different things. What do you expect to get out of your training program here? What are your limitations? What are some barriers you face with your training, which we know from our case study last week? Time commitments, things like that. Could even be a simple thing, or like, are you a morning or afternoon trainer? If they say morning, I'll say, great, we got a class tomorrow morning if you come along for free. Question 4 I put down is, what style of exercise do you prefer? So if they say, oh, I like doing group training, I might give them the group training flyer. Or if they like doing boxing as a class on tomorrow night, sort of all those things like that. This one does say new client, so I guess we should probably ask, new things. So we want to try to find out as much as we can. As I said, just the main thing is just to direct them to the right sort of service or things like that. Maybe for you, Gus, if you think another one there is, do you have any medical injuries or illnesses, current illnesses you can put down? Sweet. All right, looks like we're up to number 4, so we'll go to that. So medical needs. Number 4 is listings. Again, just looking at ways we can sort of best, provide the services. So what are some barriers, and just a strategy for each. So I put down a whole list of strategies there. So what I want you guys to do, barriers. I've given you one example. So this is the way, just follow the way I've written the strategy. So for example, I did, the client says to me, oh, sorry, I can't train. I've got an injury, shoulder reco, for example. A strategy though is, how about we combine our rehab with our sessions, so we could still train, but instead of doing your rehab at home, we could actually still do a session where we come in and combine our rehab with our training sessions. We could focus on lagging areas. So if he's got a shoulder reco, we could still work on our mobility. As we said with Braden before, us guys hate stretching, so we could actually use that time away to work on a weakness. As I put down, work on other areas. We could work on lower body. We can work on flexibility. We can work on even things like skills and mental fitness. So that's one. So they want 3. So as I said, I put down a few there for you to choose. So what I want you to do is just choose 3 and then put down a strategy for each. So injury, I've covered there. Time management. Maybe you can talk about things like, planning ahead on Sunday nights, sort of plan their week ahead in advance. Even just accountability, really. Time management is that's why PT works, I think, is they book in for a session, so they're just accountable. They've actually got to turn up. They pay for it, so they actually can't sleep in the gym. They actually got to go. Put down some of your examples. So just for yourself, things that you found. If you put down, say, self-esteem or maybe energy, put down some strategies you might use yourself. Financial, other clients might say, I can't afford a PT. So other options could be, most gyms actually offer a 6-week training program where they get a free program. Small group PTs, group training. Yep, that's good. Nice, Brad. Got your own one there. So as you said, that I think you put that down, creche. Yep. So a lot of gyms now will have creche hours. Maybe some outdoor PTs will have, mums and bubs classes as well. Just trying to get around those things. Sweet. All right. Number 5, we're looking at some. So it's list and explain. Motivational strategies we can incorporate into a group session, so a group exercise class, to create a positive environment that gets the clients motivated to come back again. So if you structure it like this, so for example, I've put down partner-based training is a motivational strategy because, simply say why. So for me, partner-based training is a good strategy because It allows clients to work together, or even friends to work together, or it fosters competitiveness. So if I put down in a group setting, if I have two competitive clients, I might put them together and they can push each other. I could even sometimes in group sessions, what I've done is I might even handicap it. So I might actually have the best person with the, say, not as competent person, and they can sort of work together. If you're sort of having a race against other teams, just make it competitive. So I put down some examples there. If you just want to pick out some or think of yourself, and just literally write down a sentence why for each one. So if you choose motivational music is encouraging because I would think it creates a fun, engaging environment, similar to a nightclub almost, to a degree, where the music's loud. Motivational music is also good for the beat, the rhythm, so they can sort of move along to the beat when they're, say, doing cardio. Just think about yourself as well. So think about if you've been to group classes, what are some things that you found sort of motivating to get you to come back? I know there's a brewery down the road from me who do beer yoga. So it's literally yoga with beer. It's pretty motivating for me. All right, so what I'll do, next question is just sort of going through a few terms. So if you just go to your chat, I've just shared that document. So I can see I don't even know what that word is, some sort of animal, the axolotl. So you both are on there, that's good. All right, Brady, do you want to do the first 5 for me? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually do 6 for me. So Brady, you do from pre-session to emergency. Anna, if you want to do some risk management, it's only 4. Actually, Anna, you do emergency down to risk management.
Sorry, Tate, are we just using the ones in the tutor notes, or? Oh,
we did it sort of write in our own words, but you can sort of use that as a guide. Yep. So I've sort of structured it so how you would do it. So best way I can put this down, and actually this will be probably easier for you, because Braden, you can use your example of, say, your gym. So for example, like, what are the pre-session instructions for when you do your session? So I put down examples like you might weigh yourself before training. There might be a hydration chart. There might be a mood check-in, like on the app. So just write down all the pre-sessions that you do before you train.
Yep. So
some of these though, like overcrowding, ventilation, like even like the next page I've got down is like the participant to instructor ratio. They might not follow that briefly, but sort of just make it up a little bit. Like, for example, like you might train, say, with your top 30 squad, 30 people, you might always have 6 staff in there. So just write down at the South Sydney gym, we have a 30-to-6 ratio. For every 30 players, there's 6 staff.
Okay, cool. And do you want it in dot points or sentence form?
Oh, just like that sentence there. So like for that one there, I said like at the South City gym, we have that.
Okay, cool.
Like that. So you only sort of need to have like 1 sentence for each, or 2 things.
So
you probably could have dot points, but like as long as you sort of have a sentence at the start. So for the hygiene, just say at our rugby league sessions, the ways we do things are, we have, cloths on the thing, or a spray and wipe after everything, like that.
Sweet.
So Anna, do you go to a commercial gym?
Yeah, I honestly don't even know the emergency or risk management or the maintenance.
That's right. So I'll talk you through them. Pre-session. So just picture yourself, like, to say do you go to like Anytime or a Jets or a Snap? Or?
No, I go to a HIIT. It's called HIIT Republic, and I go to like Pilates. So
yep. So just sort of like pre-session instructions, like just sort of think to yourself, and you can use actually you can write that down and just say at Hit Republic, the pre-session instructions include, and then just write down.
Am I doing? Am I only doing from emergency or?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's fine. And what I'll just get Braden to do is you just change it from Hit to South Sydney and vice versa.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
So for emergency, again, like just you probably notice it when you go tomorrow because I mentioned it.
Yeah.
But just think of like, just say like, there is a fire door to the left.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is not obstructed. They've got adequate signage.
Yeah. I actually don't know if they do, but yeah. They probably do. They probably do, but actually never think.
Technically, they're meant to.
They probably do somewhere. It might be like outside, like the back door. Who bloody knows? I'll look tomorrow.
Yeah, you probably won't be able to miss it now.
Yeah, I know.
You'll be seeing it everywhere. Same as risk management. Just sort of think to yourself, what measures do they place? They just say they've got the first aid kit on the wall. All staff are qualified. We hope so.
I have seen a first aid kit. I have seen that on the wall. Perfect. Okay, so that goes into risk management and.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All good. I'll do my best.
Even for the next three, so like standards of personal presentation, clothing, and the other ones. I mean, I've put some examples there. Like some gyms might be talking about like they always got to be on time, like being 10 minutes before a session. There might be, you might not know this, but just sort of think to yourself, if you were running a gym, what things you'd like to incorporate, or you have seen maybe. There might be most all gyms, PT's got to have their mobile phone on the desk so they're not talking while they're training a client. Little things like that.
Yeah.
Some little policies you might want to incorporate yourself. With the clothing, footwear, that's interesting because a lot of the trend these days is there's been a lot more people doing deadlifts. They claim if you're doing deadlifts and squats and stuff barefoot, there are some benefits. Just getting it a little bit lower, getting more mobility in your ankles. But in saying that, like if you're running a gym, like you probably would have to be mindful of people being barefoot in the gym.
Yeah.
Not just for hygiene, but also just for dropping a weight on the foot. So, what are some things that you might want to put down? Some signage, putting up, or you can maybe exclusion where they can have barefoot on doing deadlifts only. That little section.
Is standards of personal presentation and clothing not the same thing?
Yes, I thought the same, but I just reworked it to make it, if you're going to put it down for both, I changed the presentation to more standards in terms of habits. That's the way I changed it. So maybe make the standards of this one, make that more habits.
Okay. Yeah.
Like behaviors, that's I would write about. So maybe things like I said, trainers diligent with, when you do a Pilates class, or the HIIT class, just say trainers' habits where their standards are they always, walk around. They're not just sort of demonstrating it, then sitting back down. They're always walking around, checking. As I said, phones are left to the side. Little behaviors, I think. Because I thought that if we had that as clothing there, then you got nothing to write about the next one. So I changed it.
Yeah, okay. Would bringing like what's it called? A towel to training, would that be in? Do you think that would be that's in clothing? Yeah.
Yeah, put in both. I mean, I'm probably sure Braden put it in hygiene as well, but
okay.
No, put it in clothing. And it's even probably standards as well. Creating standards. So with the maintenance of equipment, so it's talking more about like, because this is more about like if you were running a gym, or like what is the gym that you go to, like how do they implement the policies and procedures. So sort of more looking about what policies do they have in place to make sure that the equipment is used and cared for and maintained. So you could maybe just write down, you know, my current gym has a daily cleaning routine like that. So they have, you know, they tick off, you know, a checklist that they do every day to make sure that that's done. But also
like clients putting the weights back after classes, or
yeah. Which is like I put down the last one is what are the policies for gym users as well. So you can even talk about the floor staff have worked hard to create a culture where clients automatically put their weights back. Because like if you're a floor staff person, like you don't want to always be doing it. So if you can just sort of really set the standards high, so the clients do it naturally anyway. And you know, with environments, what if that's just the environment, people just conform to it. So say put some signs up saying, you know, make sure you re-rack the weights, but also staff for the walking around. You'd say staff walk around just to make sure. So when both of you have done those two, if you want to sort of stick your ones in this, let's call that the draft page.
have I written enough on my one? I don't know if I have. I haven't really wrote much.
That's all right. We've discussed it. We talk about it. I'm still learning. Draft. Hold on. Yep, signs around the gym as well. That's good. First aid box is located on the wall of the gym. Qualified trainers. Let's also add risk management. I probably put that last point I put down here. Just say that staff engage in risk hazard reduction each morning. Which, for example, would be like when they're talking about risk hazard or risk reduction would be, for example, if you go train outdoors, like you'd always go and check the surface just to look at the risks. Check for potholes. What else you got? So that's good. Yeah, that's good. Yep, check them in. Hey, Brad, you probably don't have to worry about emergency. I've got Adam to do that one. So.
Oh, easy, sweet.
If you just
confident with that one too. Killing me.
I liked how you were having the orientation session, and because I ran a school gym and I actually had to do that as well for every student. And
oh, really?
Yeah, running a big orientation and ticking off that they can do it.
None of mine are in there, are they?
So if you just want to highlight your ones like that, and then put them into this draft.
Should I change that participant to instructor ratio, or just leave it? Because I don't.
Oh, because it's got where is it?
Trainers.
Yeah, if you can change it to how you have it. Roughly.
Yeah. Okay. 30 people. But
30 yours. It always depends on the session. Depends on what type of session you're running. Things like that.
Is this the one that I go to now? Like what I'm at now? Is that what I'm doing, or?
The draft one. This draft page.
I mean, do I? Yeah. So the participant to instructor, that's at the gym that I'm at now. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Just base it off roughly. Obviously, Braden's one's going to be a little bit different for you, but that's fine. As long as you've got, don't change this too much, because that's fine. As long as you've got sort of an answer down for each one.
Sort of all we need.
That's it. Just leave it. That's fine. We've worked through it. We've discussed it. That's fine.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Well, Braden, I can see your ones are in there. Yep, yours are done. Sweet. All right. Let's go to question 7. Last one for this one. Right. This question is a bit annoying. That's right. So it's just talking about 3 different types of training. So they're talking about what are the guidelines and precautions if you were doing the following 3 types of training. So we have put down that if you were doing a sport or a gym, and you might do these types of training in that gym or sport. Otherwise, just put down, like say for you, Anna, just write down gym for the activity. Whereas Braden, you might actually do some sort of strength training within your current program. You might do some circuit training in the off season, I'm guessing. You might also do some high intensity interval training as well. So you can put down rugby league, Anna put down gym. All we want to put down, pretty much the focus here, is just writing down some precautions of these 3 activities, because this is sort of looking at group training, and we just want to write down some precautions that might occur if you were doing these 3 things. So you can pretty much just sort of read these and paraphrase. I put down a pretty good list, I think, for each of the precautions. While you're just sort of doing that, as I said, just sort of getting these and sort of putting into your own words, I'm going to talk about each one, just so you have a bit of awareness about what each of these are. So first one is, it's a type of training called HIIT training. Well, actually, Anna, I might get you to talk about it. What does HIIT mean?
High intensity training.
Yeah, well, actually, there's two types. Actually, I'm glad you said that. There's actually high HIT, which is high intensity training, and there's also which is this type is actually called the HIIT, so high intensity interval training.
Yeah.
The difference is high intensity training is just literally what it says, high intensity training. Whereas technically high intensity interval training, I think it refers more to a cardio setting where, let's say, for example, you're on the rower and you're doing 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off for 5 times, because it's like set intervals. So that might come up a lot, high intensity interval training. So with that in mind, and even this is actually very similar to your one, and it's the same thing really.
Yeah.
These are the precautions. So what we've got down for that one is it's high intensity training. So you know there should be a pre-screening because people are exposed to high intensity. So we should do the pre-screening to make sure that we're screening them for any conditions like that. Number 2, not suitable for anyone answering. Obviously, anyone who answers yes in stage 1, or they have any sort of illnesses, injuries, probably not suitable. And for the contraindication, so what that word means is it's anything that makes it worse. So for example, a bench press is a great exercise for building muscle and upper body strength, but a bench press for some clients might actually make it worse for them. So it's an exercise that makes it worse for a person. So for a person with, let's say, a shoulder injury, a bench press would actually make it worse. So it's an exercise or a condition that is contraindicated. It means that for them, it'll make what they have, it'll actually do them more harm than good. If that makes sense. It will come up again in the next few things. So I'll put down all heart conditions. It's probably the main sort of thing to worry about. With the strength training, so the precautions, I guess, again, we want to do a pre-screening. I put down, it's probably more important if we're thinking of strength training as like a structured training, like a 6-week working towards increasing your strength and things like that. I put down it's probably more of the pre-screening is recommended, but also the appraisal, because we want to have like that sort of baseline to work from. So then 6 weeks time we can retest. So I just sort of put down it's important to have a pre-testing baseline stats for that, which is what I mean by number 2. It's saying that the trainer is recommended to use the information above to write a personalized program. And because I put down it's mostly about progressive overload. So if we do want to sort of really engage in strength training, we want to progressively overload the muscle. So it's gradually, not just plateauing, but we're always progressively overloading it. The last one, to paraphrase, is the correct weights and exercises chosen must be to the client's level. But I also put goals and movement patterns. So, doing power cleans might suit one client, but if they're not really focusing on power training, it might not be that important or good for them. That's probably the main things. And the last one is talking about circuit training. So with circuit training, normally it's a combination of it's mostly resistance exercises, but done in a cardio format or an endurance format. So I put down that there should be an aerobic and a dynamic warm-up. So if you're doing weights, purely with weights or strength training, it's just the main thing is you've got to really have the dynamic stretching, movement patterns, band work. That's probably the number one. But if you are doing some cardio, we also need to sort of warm the heart up as well. So I put down, do both cardio and stretching for a warm up. With circuit training, it's important to have clear instructions and demonstration as a precaution. So think of if you have 10 stations, it's important that you actually do demonstrate each station. A good thing though, I will say with F45, Anna, have you been to F45 before?
Yeah, I was there for ages.
Yeah. So a good thing like they do is they have like lanes or sort of tracks.
Yeah.
And they have the screen. So
I love those screens are the best because when I go to HIIT now and I'm there at 5:30 in the morning, my brain doesn't work that early, it doesn't work this late. And I need those screens.
They demonstrate like how many exercises, and you sort of, the person's doing it, you're not really listening. Hey, you're sort of like,
I listen. Yeah. I just don't.
Stay.
It does not stay in. And I feel so bad for some of the trainers.
Yeah. So, and you don't want to be the person to ask the trainer. So
I am always a person to ask a trainer.
But that screens though, how was that? So, but if we don't have the luxury of doing that though, you definitely got to have the demonstration instruction.
Yeah.
Also, it's important to have for a circuit class, say if you've got 10, 20 people even, put down the third dot point. It's important about having a regression exercise. You can't perform the actual exercise. So F45, they do the demonstration of every exercise, as you remember, but they also do, from memory, they do often throw in the regression as well. So they often just say they're doing, okay, we're going to do the sandbag, the cleans with the sandbag. If you can't do like that, just do a row. So they actually do give a regression. But worst case, as a trainer, just always have an idea of a regression in your head if you have a client who can't do that exercise. So you can always go, okay, let's try this. And not even just a lot of people just say, well, just say, for example, you can't do, like say you're doing push-ups, for example. Always think about not just doing your knees. Think about working in the same muscle group but a different movement pattern. So just say if you've got someone with a bad shoulder, they can't do the pushing movement. Even if they go onto their knees, they can't just do the pushing movement.
Yeah.
So what would be an exercise that still works the chest, but doesn't actually get them to do that pushing movement? Well, a chest fly, it's working the chest, but it's not actually pushing down. So always think about different muscles for different movements, and then the monitoring and precautions. Sweet. So, Braden, you're good. Turn that in. Turn yours in, Anna.
Yeah, I just gotta go and get my charger.
Yep, you're right.
I'll turn this in now.
First one done. I'll give you a 2-minute break.
Yeah, okay.
No dramas, no rush. So top right is the turn in.